I still remember the scent of pine sawdust clinging to my denim apron on the morning of June 15, 2010 like it was yesterday. You don't forget the day your world cracks open. That smell used to calm me, but now it just rolls through my mind like a bitter joke. My name is Ethan Marshall, 38 years old, and for the first 354 days of every year I survived off honesty and calloused hands. Carpenters don't lie to wood. You measure what's real or it bites you. That philosophy didn't work with people. I learned the hard way. My shop was tucked between a dive bar and an old library in Boston's South End, the kind of place with creaky floors and whispered ghosts. My sister Carol grew up 3 blocks away and still baby talks me like I'm 10 even when all I want is silence. My mom lives in Dublin, but she insists I breathe Boston air every summer to visit Clara's family and theirs, or at least she did before the divorce. Papa's an alky cartographer who maps the inside of whiskey bottles these days. My life was simple shaped things. My heart belonged to Clara Benedict until that summer when I became a man who knows the exact odor of betrayal, like mold blooming in sunlight and honeysuckle strangled underfoot. Clara was a music teacher with ink-stained fingers from juggling sheet music and her sketchbook for as long as we dated. Our house had an upright piano in the living room she called her second passion, though she neglected it when desperate for rent money. I fixed furniture in the garage, and she played Chopin when I hammered nails. We got a prenuptial agreement because she'd panicked about my carpentry debts and maybe she knew. Over 4 years I'd overlook things. The way her phone lit up like a June bug at night, the pseudo-accents she'd toss into conversations after evenings at Daniel's parties. Daniel Lee, a hedge fund analyst with slick hair and smoother smiles who lived upstairs in her apartment building before we bought the house. I let him into our circle because Clara said he was her creative buffer while composing her project. Creative buffer. Right. While I was in Dublin last July remortaring my mom's garden wall, Carol sent me a photo, just a polaroid snatched from our kitchen window. Clara laughing arm draped around Daniel Lee, who had his hand on her thigh like they were old lovers instead of old deceivers. The photo had been lying in Carol's bag when she helped me shovel crushed seashells into the foundation of our house. She never mentioned it, known for 3 months. And I blank-eyed fool nuanced our wedding venue with a Celtic triskele etched into the hardwood of our living room table. Romantic Ethan, always. I returned early. Flight cut short. Heather, the travel agent, said tickets don't refund partial stays. I didn't tell Clara. Cracked open our front door to the house we restored together, hoping her face would spill surprise. It didn't. She hugged him tighter as I stood there, wooden suitcase handle groaning in my grip. Daniel's eyes were kettle black. Clara opened her mouth, but all came out was a sob, not a word of apology. I remember asking if the sheets were dirty. She shifted. June 20th, 2010. I carved our initials into the attic floorboard. She moved out 24 hours later. Daniel followed her like a trained retriever. They took the piano she'd loved. I kept the floor. Time passed, but not healing. The plan began knitting inside me when Maya showed up to my shop with dead Millie Kako Vin and her arms covered in new tattoos. Quoted Plath. Said she wanted to tell me for years but couldn't. Clara had confessed her confusing phases once but never named faces. Maya Clarke, 27, bartender at the Flintridge Lounge, but whispered temptress in our group since college, had always been a friend who flirted with my reflection. Cute laughs, lingering in hip bumps and low saddles of whiskey over ice. Even after the betrayal when I shined nothing but anger into every beveler I carved, Maya stayed. Let me go to him, she said one night when my hammer smashed a table leg and she squatted beside me cleaning the splinters, her voice silk and lit matches. Let me ruin him slow. Let me feel his arteries before I cut them. She started shadowing Daniel's haunts. Joke was he flocked to indie exhibitions for affect, paid premium for drinks he never tasted during gallery talks. Maya slid through those events line-thin in a black dress with auburn hair dye that screamed regret, and Daniel bit. He saw her with my eyes etched under hers. He followed her into alleyways and bar booths while fleets of text messages slid into her inbox, complaints about Clara's coldness, like the affair was a two-legged stool letting him tip his weight. I watched clips online, classic rock over headphones like a sniper listening to his own heartbeat. August 18, 2011. Daniel proposed. To Maya. Absolute tool. This man who ruined what Clara and I built decided this was love. Slipped her a ring with platinum and larceny in it. I burned a stool face-to-face with her in my workshop and demanded she refuse. Her pupil narrowed, said no. I haven't finished painting yet, Van Gogh. She kept the ring, which twisted things into something ill-formed in me. I offered to reach out. Daniel's way smarter than Clara ever pretended to be. Maya slapped my chest, then whispered, "He can feel you." That's the point. I didn't see it until the snow fell again. On Christmas Eve, Maya showed up, teeth chattering, white-lipped, red-eyed. Daniel had proposed an open relationship last week while filming her as she argued the twist. He was lesbian curious. The word lesbian ran through me like a double saw. She laughed herself into a crying fit and said Clara was his plan A. They resumed meeting in secret. Clara warned him about my rage. Maya, the tool, the user, the septic tank child. Stupidity took root after that. We had access to Daniel's apartment because Clara never changed locks. She'd laughed and called it security through predictability. The night of January 12th, Maya and I let ourselves in. Candlesticks, matches, leather couches. Everything screamed disposable wealth. We waited in his bedroom. Not romance in the setup, but vengeance. She lay beside me whispering, "Expects a tryst, says you and I never got our chance." But when Daniel opened the door, his eyes didn't shatter. He glared, then smiled, then said, "Clara warned me the ghost in your system walks sideways." I wish I hadn't left that night. My clothes smelled like his Pandora's box, and I couldn't pick out which was real. And Maya, so strong throughout everything, shook in the car. I asked her what was wrong, but she said, "Take me to the emergency room." Unzipped her jacket and my chest erupted. Blood bloomed from her ribs in a floral print. Daniel had waited longer than she thought before severing whatever string bound them, and he did it with something sparky and stainless. He said the blood would be mine next time. I drove us to the hospital, wheels screaming against asphalt, and my hands shaking so bad the steering wheel creaked like chair legs on hardwood. Maya breathed in hiccups the way piano keys used to warp when Clara's fingers stumbled. Her blood soaked my chest now, and then surged from her mouth like paint squeezed from a torn tube. 3 nurses hauled her away inside trauma doors that slammed shut like a drawer jammed with cheap glue. I paced the hallway scuffed with antiseptic and fear, muttering it's not a rehearsal, because that's what she'd say when I stacked my grandfather's chisels in the right order, dreaming of choking Daniel with his own silk scarves. 2 hours later, a doctor named Graves with eyes like blunted drill bits asked questions his clipboard guarded against. Did anyone know of underlying conditions? Did anyone see the weapon? Underlying condition. A 3-year-old grudge that hardened in my gut. The weapon, a stiletto he kept gleaming to slice who knows what else in that apartment. Maya's out of surgery, but a live, grave voice. I'm dismissed when dawn peaks blue over Boston's dome. Back home, I stare at the attic floorboard where our old initials swim beneath decades of dust. Clara's laughter flickers somewhere inside my head. I often wondered what our marriage would smell like. Maybe sawdust, and ink, maybe only the weak cleanup that comes after vows sour. Now the house is only hers, like she scrubbed me into sanding sawdust into the wallpaper. I start drinking espresso like it's gasoline and chain it with scotch. The shop sits empty except for Carol, who shows up Wednesday afternoon with hungrier eyes than mine. Danny S. got a friend on the police force. She says, her voice chewed up by some digestive tremor. They're hunting your face. I wanted to yell this guy ruined the only thing that mattered, but instead pick at the splinter quarantined under my fingernail. She unzips her coat like confession, revealing the same knife wound 16 years ago on her skin, a story I'd never asked to know until now. Our mother whispered about Dad's outbursts. Carol choked on darker details. That night I'd dream of lullabies and broken violins. Wake up sweating acid. Daniel's becoming a ghost wearing water safely. Maya limps to my door, taped to a cane twice warped. She reeks of antibiotics and betrayal. He truve ment Chinese letter, as he's high up in the financial world. Blackmail claims, but I never asked how he got his status. I started trying to push him with exit signs, but he reverses the script back into you. You're component material now. Cleary says she's afraid of you. Daniel twisted Maya's nerves like copper wiring during our wind's back and forth assault. Clara claimed I was unstable now. She called Carol, demanding surveillance on my erratic behavior. Expiration dates never repeated themselves, but the way Clara swerved all fears into his orbit. I stood under the porch light, sodium fading, and compared my heart to a faulty wood lathe chuck wobbling progress into cat shit ruin. Maya drove herself home so fast we didn't even flinch goodbye. The months forward shuffle teeth into dust. My shop dwindles into daydream-less orders to root. Clara publishes her first music album, she says includes melodies from Midnight Walks. Daniel performed in the studio backup vocals, something choky as a silencer test. December comes like a fire extinguisher, and the headlines scream maybe Maya odd somewhere downtown. I couldn't speak, call the hospital, numb all kinds of maybes. 1 week later, the tabloids show her face whilst giving a former user's scream behind camera flashes. Substance abuse affects even the most artful souls. She isolated herself. Daniel's blaming spreads like black mold inside her heart. I find myself stacking crates at Not House Reclamation, where worn timber gets another fame, and I believed for a split breath carved scenes of victims mattered. Then one morning a body drops, not a timber. My sprawling ivory staircase photos leaked confirming overdose power packs. Newspaper coronated her tragic beauty, and all my rage melted into catatonia. Clara posts of regrets, and Daniel punctuates it with glossy poem. I circle Maya's funeral home, hands crawling into tender fits, but instead get shoved against a brick wall by a CREWNEL coatless in the December smell. Do it again, they grunt, breath smelling like breath mints and pepper spray. Poison Danny's life the way he poisoned yours. Suicide clause, insurance money. I laughed, cracked compass, how weak the offer. Cruel as urban planners, yes. Better people with blueprints than hate. January hits ticking the same way as my old pendulum clock, a cadence easily stopped. I've stopped paying property taxes, stopped accepting calls from auction houses, satiated in the house we fixed but not fixed, where Clara stripped every memory down to soul-dumb artwork she once drew. The piano left turned into a sculpture of cat phones and flat soles. February gets insidious. Carol knocks furiously past Dawn, pulling me from another bedrid Freudian stuff. Webpack Sid. Clara sees another analyst. You're putting trauma into quarantine. Old tapes of Daniel's phone sex reshaped public. Clara lied directly to his leverage, then Descartes into a closed legal team muttering over breach meets. Daniel cages the assets. Clara walks barefoot afterwards when Carol snaps photos of her, calloused nerves, and emerged during parking lot emergencies. Meanwhile, I stood on train tracks littered with crumpled sketches of our kitchen table. The Celtic triskele she loved now looks like Nautica rune screaming disorder. Then on April 19, 2012, 3 men drag me in once my delivery vehicle flips into a curbstones. They throw more tape and urge me forward onto reclining chairs in an interrogation room more frigid than our cellar floors. One man crumbles Carol's statements into evidence where her love and jealousy swinumber the timeline. Maya's overdose heard like poisoned gift with my prints etched on the phone she texted me last. Clara hovers at Starbucks opposite the precinct. Daniel records it like table-blaring content, released without convictions but encrusted with whispers. Assault groupie, unbalanced, Mr. Vailleur. My workshop folds under permits and lawsuits. Chair legs break loose. My sister Carol reduces me to WEEP, Arabic Hamzatat Talif, Arabic Ket, Arabic Bat, Arabic Khalif, Arabic Rot each time she texts. She flees Boston now, says she'll work with my ex-mother-in-law Aristotle lessons. 3 weeks unemployed, I walk through yuppie heaven north of Park, where Daniel does charity work for foster homes dressed as savior perpetrating delicate speeches. He elevated his assets beyond mud and dirt. Clara twirl left inside him bit by bit, each step coordinated by animals. Clara's at his side, flashing wag gestured rings hidden in plastic jungles. When I approach, Clara mouths don't without pressure. Daniel nods toward a SUV armed with satellite feed to my face's disgrace. Then not a charmed encounter, but my epiphany starts parsing plank by plank, us damning ourselves exponentially, our marriages confloated bombs. No exit but Daniel's source written in whispers. Charles is back in my radius, a yoga trainer who once handled Daniel's home renovations. He got jacked at the time, maybe my fault, but now he schedules smolder royalties and invites me to demonstrate wood bevels at his new studio, hidden in maybe a solo bout of generosity. I slide through conversations like petrichor, tools awaken. Charles flicks on tablets in a lathe like uncovering faults. A lot of it, Daniel's got criminal records buried flute clear because his father's a reparations magnate who covered up an alleged incident where a college lover caught a light post-argument. Burmese shrinkles, secret payments. Clara could hit a record high water every time he fed her compliant vision of piecemeal freedom. I merge my soul again, utter void. Maya's cremains at the office. Carol sends texts with ads for therapy parallels. Clara's composer pack earns Grammy nods like crops. June 3, 2012. Charles drives us to watch Daniel's boat party from a pier drifting with molasses tears. Others forget Hughes, but I study his ecosystem swarming with women, maybe 20-something nibbling champagne toothpicks while he funds their velvet muses. The weapon was dispossession. Charles says face shimmered by moonlight. Cut him where he's augmented. We build traps from density. laws too sparse. We script alternative justice. So the next 2 months I study the patents of his investors and plant bugs in Charles' meeting rooms. Bespoke furniture gigs alter into junk encrypted devices. Daniel's office leased monster plants from Trey scripts inside them. A come-together that culminates as the gallery, where they first met, something titled Turbulent Junctures. Except this time Clara hosts her sheet music in solo performances. Daniel heads our reconstruction, but pulls punches. We back him into multi-retake adjustments. Then Act IV's turning gem, recording at Charles' studio, walks into obliquity as Clara streams out truth punctuated by coughs and Ryan gins from painkillers. She de-exaggerated our breakup because weak hearts need embellishment, but Daniel had cornholed her with debtor manipulations. A passive agreement consuming our home's equity, turning our carpentry into his nested troves. She whispers if I wanted to pull him under, but only if we skipped prosecutors for finality. I smelled pine again, silica over terminate. The workshop now bore title deeds to my lost projects. I etched the phrase from Walt Whitman's middle sonnet, the one about losers normalize salvation. He told lies, but Clara sat stage left, mouse click Reggie, checking cuffs undone, clicking record every lie he massaged before. By August 17th, 2012, we finalize rehearsal 10 steps into execution. No more leaving clues, no telephone property, minimalist strategy. Retrieve particular paper housed in mold-ingrained apartments, shift them to the media swamp, inaugural pictures leaked. But what hit me next wasn't clarity but red pill. Daniel Lee's real mentor was our old shadow flaking algae through Buddhism. My kissing Clara's winter-kissed skin again, even once, wasn't betrayal anymore. I carved a new table with a hellflow abundant knotwork etched like pianoforte fingers, burble micro-recorders syruped in resin-resistant applique. For his birthday, he requested dining pieces built to echo legacy. The guest list at the launch recital includes Clara and me seated as stripped incidents his memoir tactlessly explores. The piano piece sounds like teeth lodged in time. I brought the table beige aged. He touches it with reluctant love. Clara whispers this'll manifest the ailment collect. At difference from 4 years previous, I measure again. Carpentry ingrains forgiveness. We turned his dopamine into an archive waiting earlier exposure. I pilot meniscus datasets onto Maya's failed emotions and expand. Need not gauge revenge anymore, gauging strengths and leverage principles. He gracias the table blings. Clara's been fired, more sympathetic, now somber. I pause like struck by joist glint, concede not step toward him again. My hammer finally readies its inventions. The trap glistens. We didn't charge willpower anymore. We charge closure with the feel of composite textures. My fingers dance the strings he never knew were his own apparel. Foreshadowed truth needs new structures, cinematic but factual. The narrative must continue. This part snatch background tunneling several separations, but deja vu Lucas. Stokes, surgeons patched Maya family's immune system, but Daniel stitched her vitals like false rabbit joints. We plan now with wider rims and new currency. A manhunt with forks. We embed the piano. Clara recruits his assistant as a flanking firewaller. I teach myself ledger trails, heroin protocols, data brokerage. All the pitfalls he dove into as if rubble streets afforded catharsis. My lowest point excavated, but no shattered knees here, just shaky vertigo. Somewhere mid-autumn 2012, my hand rests along an unfamiliar table I drilled myself as tenacity. Its legs patterned honeycut angles. When Clara reemerges paler, she touches its surface and captures my rhythm. He'll flip his skin inside, she says, when he sees his time exposed. But for table launch tonight, Daniel approaches with venal richness, says the timber, stink of humility till you crowdsmell it. Clara's looking up, we know which screen luminescence hoard his death knell. He sits and we wait, but the final chords won't ignite until next winter's open gallery. We ally now like bentwood and finalizing glue. Charts, timepieces, unsealed archives. Acting timeline differs from real. Reality demands you gutter beyond thought, but reinvention sits at the hilt of sound cues. I still hold Maya's ashes like a secret bridge inside my strongbox. Each morning I revisit how her blood ranked incantation in hotel sheets, smells that can't renegotiate love without guilt. But the entire laughcap edge burns throaty now. Daniel's entire empire, a veneer hiding cabinet grooves. We etch our comebacks into furniture, food embalms with notes, letters bandaged behind breadboards, and even Clara jumped me once, recent sans accented tones and murmuring, I want to cauterize our champagne and hate with each other before we're see-through. This time I hold Myrep's inspiration. I held my annotated revenge back like a drawknife, minimizing the wipe. Clara leaves our pre-fake arguments murmuring, quicker liberation requires harder wood. My soul now polyurethaned. I carved 12 dining markers over spring 2013, each splintered with his financial trickleroos. Recordings eavesdropped on the boat blurt scenarios. Clara captures meetings that reek of pills. We tag the narrative like invoices needing decoding. Then, June 5th, Carol shows up march-eager through dandelion dusk. "Speak to me again," she snaps, mittened in engagement rings glad to shatter from aspen repel packs. I never saw Danny's truth till ACLU met me at Boston's airport. He's on payroll for suppression circuits. Figured she meant me the victim, but she meant Danny Lee, a larger one. She hands me a thumb drive with Caroline font, buried 2 floors down in their art studio. He stole my thesis too. 6 full bands of celled video snaps with Clara's knit modeling while he poured pixie dust. Eyes like nutmegging I became. Her words unhinged myself forward to 40 days after. Art Gallery Benares hosts Daniel Lee's rehabilitation exhibit titled Duality Repaired. Clara performs a concert in wire mesh hair while the table I forged, the one armed with undocumented grief, glistened under avant-garde lights. The night wraps tropical-shaped we unthinkable. Clara mentions an old letter she hid since 2010. Daniel inverted female neuroses like problems to unpuzzle with fingerplay. He'd absorbed Buthanol evidence from multiple affairs, used their breakdown rituals. Clara battled cry violins in previous years without context. The letter now rests in our suit like match fluid inside his commentated speech. When the speeches start, Daniel clasps my shoulder, a premeditated buzz. "Ethan, you still make things real, huh?" "This is super dia de los." He beams through me. Clara scrolls at Secretier's Twitter feed displaying Daniel's old passport where he lived Manila under third family. Name a shuffle, occupation vague, entire life counterfeit glue-ups. So tonight's not vengeance, tonight's documentation. We leaked all files cap-topping 6 presses in sequence. Clara's backstage playing a chord stop gluecraft, a style she'd copied from backwards I once shared in deference. The crowd caroms into cell scramble. Daniel's numb tweet-out goes into radiant vapor the moment texts tap his gala. Charles and Carol package the dossier like combination meals at the bar. Abandoned, not even murder but hollow clogged existence now. Then project closes, solstice fades. Ethan Marshall, once weak now forged into presence. But Daniel shows up again at Lauteride's embassy concert, wants soliloquies, wants gray area, wants his apology to Dynasty unfair interpretations. Clara squeezes my left wrist again. Our plan recalibrates, instead of unmaking, unlawing. Letter remains empty for him, but final confrontation techs into Autumn's pull. Plan organizes beneath our skin like resin overtaking soft. There's a finished table incorporating all those years. Daniel commissioned 2 more. Minimalist, he suggested. Blessed by history. Clara's laugh threatens to undo my shirt seams. We watch the feed where Danny Lee heads our final trap, mousetrapped in his own vacuity. He'd never suspect Ethan after the betrayal, the trauma, the detentions. He attacks the past versions, not this newer model, so timing accelerates into breathing. Next act harbors Daniel inside a LOFT Chinese letter with stickers of his lectures on manipulation clearance levels. Clara had to fake desperation to get him there. Offer him partner but no contract equity. She'd flinch 10 different ways through the kidding, but tonight I prepare more softly. Feathers and fire codes, I swap the wine. I transpose data cherries into miles of class action suits peeling his skin advantages. And this time no knives, no intrusions, just recordings arms cooked like joint closures. I hit the scene with Carol 10 minutes behind, totalized immense. Daniel wraps a glass hazel as Clara sidles near. 3 years clean from all gauzes, huh? He whispers, exited toward me. Clara offers an acetaminophen. He nibbles them off her palm, profession. That's when they play the first loop, cluttered with his older victims. Vocal histories sold in Danube silos, whispered admissions. Clara watches his texture flay malls to interface. I'm not what insinuates, he rasps, but all concede now show him thus. Charles arrives. Archive dogs trail him like leashes. Daniel flips, but the door's chained with turnouts. Our voices wrap around him, wind bend, measured, not as amateurs. Final act gestions into emancipation frame. Not vengeance, reverse architecture. We exposed his income's timber with splinters, trapped him into new installations, prepared to final dispassion. Act IV collapses not on his surrender but on mine, to what the pursuit costed and how Clara's eye now peeks not behind but through properties of change. We downplay nostalgia. We build complications. Chinese letter unfolds toward 7,000 threads, but this night shouldn't conclude so. We park him lower than he foresaw, but not dormant. We stitched our final catapult. Seeds spill toward May appendix. Act 5, Rev feels lawful, but not yet. Let the hard hats G further forward. I sleep now, though. In my shop, past installed, present pressed. Future likened to oak nursing grots, but harder than noli logs. Planning toward the finale, our collision had morphed him, our edges matched him, finally punctured. Someday the narrative ends, but not yet, not tonight. Chinese letter, we go silent. Clay frozen. Status anticipate. Chinese letter, OPOLIS feeds him into audit rivers, and Clara, once the crush on low horizon wrists, now scrapes open my bearings, a new saying. But what rebuilds after the winding down? I tell her not to adjust her lens, but to widen it, sift the film incidents into Beta Haberdash instead. I draw on a new table, Clara, inscribed with pneumatic transfers. She ain't my victim anymore, she's my sawhorse, my partner in demolition, not of people but manipulative craft. Plans swim like plankton inside me. I whisper Clara's father's old motto, craft secondary, subtext dead. I carve again, not betrayal, not fury, but truth, one primary block at a time. The gallery hushes when Daniel touches the table. His fingers glide over the knotwork, a labyrinth I carved from every failure he fed us. Clara stands near the piano her father once praised, her hair coiled in wire mesh as if prepping for surgery. I'm near the door with Charles and Carol, our alliance a Venn diagram of scars overlapping. The lights dim. He leans closer, eyes narrowing at a latch I installed, a false drawer above his lap. Craft secondary, I say, my voice fog. The crowd panics when data bursts onto 7 projectors. His passport under different names, voice memos bargaining with heroin suppliers. Clara sliced into pixels, whispering, he stole the pills from my purse. Carol's thesis abstracts crawl through slides, the architecture of control, followed by interviews where Maya's words disintegrate under airbrushed photos of Daniel selling rehab clinics as guilt shelters. Is mother okay? I need to continue the revenge story from Act 5 to Act 6 based on the provided context. Let me first try to understand the existing plot and characters to maintain consistency. The protagonist, Ethan, is seeking revenge against Daniel, who has manipulated and destroyed his marriage with Clara, led to Maya's death, and caused significant personal and professional turmoil. The story is in first person, so I have to keep that perspective. The previous part ends with Ethan and Clara preparing for the final confrontation. They have a plan involving recordings and exposing Daniel's crimes. The user wants Act 5 as the climax and Act 6 as the aftermath and transformation. Important points to include: Daniel's downfall through their setup, the aftermath where Ethan and Clara reflect on their journey, and the emotional closure. I should start Act 5 with the confrontation. The setting is Daniel's loft where Clara has lured him. They play recordings of his past victims, need to show Ethan's composure compared to his earlier rage. Maybe include the archival material, allies like Carol and Charles, and the methodical expose of Daniel's manipulations. Then Daniel's reaction, panic, disbelief, but also the realization that he's cornered. In Act 6, the aftermath. Ethan's transformation from seeking revenge to finding closure through creation. Clara's role changes from victim to partner. They might continue exposing corruption, but in a different way. Maybe mention Maya's ashes, the toll of revenge on their lives. The ending should tie up loose ends. Daniel's fate, their new partnership, and the theme of truth over vengeance. Need to keep the tone cinematic and immersive with continuous text without paragraphs. Reading level 8th grade, so avoid complex sentences but maintain vivid descriptions. Use English only, no foreign words or symbols. Ensure no markdown, just plain text. Check for character consistency. Ethan is a woodworker who uses his craft symbolically. Clara is a musician affected by Daniel. Maya was a victim of Daniel's manipulation, leading to her overdose. Carol is Ethan's sister, involved in the revenge plot. Charles is the yoga trainer ally. Ensure all these elements are addressed in the conclusion. Also, the story should meet the minimum character count, around 70,900 characters. Let me estimate, the previous story was about 25,000 characters, so this continuation needs to be longer. But since it's Act 5 and 6, need to expand but keep it flowing. Potential scenes: the recording playback in the loft, Daniel's panic, legal consequences, Ethan and Clara moving forward. Maybe a final reflection on how revenge changed them. Avoid cliché resolutions, perhaps bittersweet. Ethan finds a new purpose in his work. Clara and her music, but the scars remain. Mention Maya's legacy and ensuring Daniel's exposure doesn't just destroy him but also serves as a warning. I should weave in elements from the previous acts. The use of furniture with hidden recordings, Clara's past drug issues, Charles' studio, the hidden data. The resolution should complete their character arcs. Maybe Ethan acknowledges the cost of revenge, the loss of Maya, and rebuilding his life with Clara, but not as husband and wife, rather collaborators. Avoid any mistakes with formatting. Continuous text, no paragraphs. Use a flowing style with cinematic descriptions. Make sure the revenge is completed poetically. Daniel's downfall through the recordings, his loss of reputation, legal issues, etc. Then the aftermath. Their new projects, tying up the story while showing emotional transformation. Let me start drafting Act 5, beginning with the confrontation. Describe the setting, the tension, the specifics of their trap. Use first person to show Ethan's emotions and observations. Then move to Act 6, showing their new life, the cost, and the resolution. Need to connect the workshop, the piano, Clara's music, and the theme of crafting truth versus revenge. Act V, the loft dripped with Daniel's ego. Every inch of concrete and exposed piping arranged to his specifications. Sticker-frayed blueprints of control, pasted to graffitied plaster like stuck-on tattoos. Clara led him inside with a smile that had taken months to engineer, brittle at the edges, but laced with enough warmth to melt the ice he mistook for his own legacy. Me and Carol lurked in the hallway like unfinished furniture, our breath held tight against the door's hollow core. His laugh rang first, syrup on broken glass, twinning with the clink of Cabernet I'd swapped during his detour bathroom. The sipping silence followed, syrup thickened. "We're documenting something," Clara said, her piano player's fingers plucking the USB drive from a breadboard we'd aged to mimic our divorce. A coda. She plugged it into his projector without ceremony, the screen blooming with faces I'd traced through 3 states. College girls with fluted bones sucked into his orbit, sprinters he'd backed into crash diets, employees who swallowed his mortgage edits. None of them knew each other existed. He didn't either. The videos layered his voice from Manila killings, his fingers adjusting cameras during Carol's forced slitterous selfie, Clara's own choked sobs across ambient wires tapped for his rehab exhibit audits. Each clip a burl eaten raw. He stood, wine facial muscles flattening into sealer gloss. "Is this what passes for closure?" he spat, but Carol hissed the same phrase his old flame Maria used before swallowing DuPont assurances. His dad funded that Belgian trafficking ring too. Clara raised her violin bow like a conductor might a baton and triggered the letter I'd carved into the table's spine. Not carved, planted. Buried in varnish, heat-reactive lambrequins that seeped his embezzlement tactics from 12 side-tech clients. The crowd at Benari's gallery would smell lilac and malice tonight, click-clacking falsies into press mouths. Daniel stepped back or tried. Charles and his forensic tailors boxed him in now, ledger drones humming with subpoena vibrations. "You think permanence is a crown," Charles rasped, his bicep twitching where he'd once taken acid drilled into Daniel's Pilates client binge list. "It's just cedar rot." Carol delivered his manila ledger then, the one where his cousin traded marriages for sweatshop enforcements. Clara followed with the latest Grammys tape, hers, thick with redacted whispers about the healthy financial infidelity that padded her dear Danny's fiscal pivots. Stumbled, but the floorboards mocked his dissent, reinforced with resin written by our total. "You've manufactured this entire oblivion," he sneered, clutching the stigma collar already constricting nationwide exposés. I wanted to laugh. Manufacture, we just sanded off his stains. The real craft was in letting his own joints split beneath the veneer. We hit him with the final trompe l'oeil then, the security vault he'd commissioned after Maya's overdose, emptied by his own slippery syntactics. Inside, not money, not drugs, but 17 original scores Clara had written years ago, stolen and overlaid under his foster music programs, the royalties funneled into rehab centers where he stole Dream's aftercare. Clara's chin fractured when she saw the signatures on the contracts, her name, forged by a ghost who couldn't hatch back his van cargo. I gripped her wrist, not out of fear but recognition. She was looking at the audit like a violinist with their own snapped E string. "All this time," she whispered, jaw wood-grained, "he needed your light to iterate." Charles sealed the door then. All exits led to vellum, to crow's feet and depositions, to the truth baked in trimethadone journals and offshore blue books. Daniel shouted something about innocuous liaisons and deconstructed timelines, but Carol looped the video of his consulta's suicide directly, Maria's blood pooling like borax on oak-like mulch. The floor began to crack under his feet, not literally, but figuratively. We'd injected his foundation with hinoki spores, the kind that ravaged supports until bones dented his chic shoes. No fists, just finality. His phone rang twice, CNN footage of Maya's funeral blooming in real-time headlines, the one Carroll hijacked to blurt his criminal ID archive instead of grieving elegy. Clara leaned into his collapse, her lips grazing his ear the way she'd always crooned prelude piano, and said, "The table doesn't lie." Measured 3 years of whispers, teeth marks, and plaster keys in one exhale. He screamed eventually. Practiced anguish, engineered anguish. Then something quieter, veinless. The kind of silence you find under mortar. Act VI, I carved the vengeance table again, minus its archivists. Clara played its varnish the way she once did Chopin, subsisting on what our duet told about pressure. The aftermath felt less like aftermath than lull, a breath halted inside a sawblade's hum. Daniel's detentions unfolded like scaffolding. First the loft, then his patents. Finally, the DNA samples pulled from Maya's clenched fist, his skin cells interlaced with hers like inlay gone wrong. Clara signed 0 settlements but spiraled into a new album non-apologetic, her voice textured with the spatter I'd scrubbed from rental floors. I brought back the workshop with granite counters and rehab tools. Clients came asking for the furniture from his disgrace, but I redirected them. Now each custom pit was buttonholed with healthy clauses, artisan collaboration required to finalize. Clara returned 6 months later with a melody that didn't echo our tragedy. It had saxophone breaths, gravel CW. She sat on my workbench, scratched at drying lacquer, and muttered. He called on my Grammy to dissect us. I nodded stiff, lint space toggling through 3 kinds of knot burrs. Probably wrote a whole apologia over Pilates sheets. She played a note that sounded like warning tape on parquet, then clenched my shirt like she once did addiction handlers. We broke him, not into confetti, but density. That truth sedated me better than the bourbon I'd loopholed during his exile. During Maya Incineration Week, I opened the strongbox and stirred her ashes into the final table's epoxy, bubbling them into the glaze so they'd imprint permanence. Clara sat with me while it set, her palms flicking through data from canceled events. Daniel's foster network sued, CAPTCHA profiles flagged, his journals posthumously expurgated. No forgiveness, she murmured, carving her initial into drying resin where Maya's ash would calcify. Just geometry. We became conduits, not vengeful, just necessary. Carroll reappeared at Solstice Holding Court with an advocacy podcast built on ribbon sales from his nest egg, her voice now industrialized, spindled through justice pods. Charles rented warehouse spores where he taught informal classes, financial parasitism for furniture enthusiasts. My hand stayed busy etching facts into bilateral trade desks. Clara rewired her music, partnered with nonprofits that restructured abusive folktales into symphonies. We never kissed after the gala, not for hunger but for practicality. Healing didn't wear accordion seams. The final reckoning appeared in Zurich, where Daniel spent 3 years swallowed by extradition troubles. His name erased from 10 design schools, the Beatles' forged rooftop performance art blacklisted, his financial manipulatives put through analytical extra credit. Newspaper cycles paraded his disgrace in 4-part ramparts, but Clara didn't flinch watching him eaten by his own algorithms. The spider didn't spin, she told me during one autumn denies. We just quit dancing. That final image crashed my gut. Maya's overdose, our silent screams baked into that loft ceiling like fumes. Closure was Danny Lee's infarct, but our unraveling of it. His downfall didn't heal us, but it sharpened a mechanism inside. My workshop thrummed now with apprentices from discarded revenges, Clara's opus translated into refugee quartets. Last week she handed me another belly table built from invasive practices we'd recruited from Chippendale's historical watches. Finish it, she said, and I saw her angle specifications, carved not into fury but into something parallel. A relationship that fused Tet Ano. We'd never vanquished the Davids fully, just the contours they wore in our heads. I touched the grain, mapped my exact 3 years on either plane, and comported the furniture into consequence. Clara's music now lives in every rebuild box, every hilt of truth. We hand it in recovery like a small portfolio. No resume necessary.